Okay, so again, my name is Kim Meadows, and I am the Director of Training here at NADA. And I would like to take a moment to introduce our facilitator for today. But before I introduce our facilitator, do want to kind of just give some logistics on how this is going, how the webinar is going to go. So first of all, if you have any questions or comments as we're going through, you can definitely put those into the chat function as the webinar is being presented. So this can include any best practices that you're doing related to management strategies that you're using to help your staff deal with stress and uncertainty. So as Larry is going through his presentation, if there's anything that you want to share with the group as well, feel free to put those into the chat box. But to make sure that Larry has time to get through the webinar material of this next 90 minutes, he won't be answering questions during the webinar, but at the end of the webinar, toward the end of our time together, I'll be able to read the questions and comments to Larry so he can respond to them. So he won't be responding to anything after the webinar, but anything that's in the chat function, we will get to as many of those questions as possible. So now I have the pleasure of introducing our facilitator, our speaker for today, Larry Robin. So Larry Robin is the executive director of Robin and Associates. Larry has over 45 years of experience in workforce development. So he is widely regarded as a national expert in the workforce development field. And Larry has been a direct provider, service provider, manager, program designer, trainer, consultant, and keynote speaker in workforce development. He's trained over, get this, 100,000 people across the country and presented at over 500 conferences. He's done more than 300 webinars on a wide variety of topics. Larry's services have been used by over 1,000 organizations, including the Department of Labor, America's Job Centers, nonprofits, government agencies, schools, training providers, businesses, and other entities. And for NADA, Larry has done over 70 trainings and keynote speeches for our organization. And he's also written over 40 articles for NADA. So very, very impressive biography here. Larry has extensive experience. This is where that experience comes in as a manager in high stress, crisis, and uncertain situations. So he was the managing director of the City of Oakland's Dislocated Worker Program when the city was hit by a major earthquake. During that earthquake, during that time, over half of his staff and about 70% of job seekers that were served by the program lost their housing. And that includes Larry and his wife. They also lost their house during that time. He won an award from the United Way for the exemplary leadership he showed in the aftermath of the earthquake. He's provided management consulting to organizations going through major funding cuts and those dealing with natural as well as human caused disasters. Today, Larry will share with us some of the things that he has learned about managing programs in uncertain times and what we can do as managers to help our staff survive in the sea of uncertainty. So at this time, I would like to introduce our speaker, our facilitator, our trainer, Larry Robin. And Larry, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Kim. I really appreciate it. Any of you who've attended any NAUTIP trainings, you know that they run really smoothly, that they're right on point in terms of what the field needs, and that the presenters are very carefully chosen to have some unique ideas and be good presenters as well. And the driving force behind all of that is not only the NAUTIP team, but particularly I want to call out Kim Meadows for her work in guiding this huge ship of NAUTIP. NAUTIP has almost 5,000 members now, or over 5,000 members, and it's really hard to figure out what all those people want in terms of training and what they really need. And Kim does a fantastic job negotiating that. So if you have any ideas for presenters or trainers, don't hesitate to share them with Kim. She's always open to kind of looking at the new ways of doing things and the best and the brightest in terms of the effectiveness of the training. So thank you so much, Kim, for all that you do for NAUTIP. We really appreciate you. In terms of this particular topic, I train on over 100 topics in workforce development. And in terms of this particular topic, I have a love-hate relationship with this topic because it brings me back to some of the hardest times I've had in workforce development. And it also brings me back to some times when my staff and job seekers and partners came together and figured out new and better ways to cope with some of these situations so we could come out on the other side and know that it's not like we didn't pay a price for dealing with all this stuff, but that we did things that helped mitigate the impact and keep us going, serving both job seekers and employers. I want to take you back in history for a moment and just share with you a little bit of where I was kind of in one of the most stressful times I've had in this work. I was as Kim mentioned, I was managing the City of Oakland Dislocated Worker Program. It was a very large dislocated worker program. In 3.5 years, it dealt with 14,000 dislocated workers, and that was in the City of Oakland, California. So we were already seeing people who were in a lot of pain. The labor market wasn't great. There were a lot of changes happening in workforce development that were catching job seekers and workforce development professionals by surprise. And I would say that it was a pretty stressful time in the field. And I was somewhat thinking about leaving my job. And any of you who work with dislocated workers, and all of you have not by now, I'm sure, unless you're working maybe with youth getting their first job, know how stressful and difficult it can be to work with people who are kind of work with people day in, day out who are losing their jobs. So it was a typical day at work in this very high stressful environment. It was October 17th, 1989. I remember it very clearly. Part of the reason I remember it is that my wife was having an MRI, and I couldn't be there right at the start of it, but I left work early to be able to be there when she got out of the MRI machine and be able to take her home. That was kind of my view of how that day was going to play out. Mother Nature had a different idea about what was going to happen. And I found myself driving on this freeway ramp that was taking me from Oakland onto the Bay Bridge, across the Bay Bridge, and into the city of San Francisco. And all of a sudden, I felt this unbelievable shaking. It was like something I had never, ever experienced in my life. And the entire freeway started to rumble. And I thought that this is the end of the world. This is kind of, what's happening now. And somehow I'm in the middle of it. And in fact, there was a little bit of truth to that because what was happening was the biggest earthquake to hit the Bay Area since the earthquake that hit San Francisco in 1906. It was a monster earthquake. And as I looked through my rearview mirror, I saw horror of horrors. I saw the freeway collapsing behind me. And I hit the gas pedal to go as fast as I could, to drive as quickly as I could, to get as far away from the freeway falling as I possibly could. And just thinking about my wife going through an MRI, thinking about all the people, all my loved ones, all the people that we serve, my staff, and my brain was just operating at the speed of light. It was going faster than I think I'd ever had thoughts go through my head up until that point. And finally, I got to the other side of the Bay Bridge and into the city of San Francisco. And that's where I could get some news on the radio. And that's where I found out that I had just been in the Loma Prieta earthquake. And I could hardly breathe. I was so shaky. I was so nervous. And, my mind raced to every person that's important to me in my family. And then, of course, my staff and the job seekers that we were taking care of. And I have to say that part of the way that this particular webinar comes together is I did some things that I thought were really unique. First of all, I tried to talk with people around the country who had been through forest fires, been through floods, been through other kind of human or natural cause disasters and find out what they did to that I could incorporate in my managing of this program to help keep the work going and to keep the staff spirits up as they tried to plow through all the fallout, literally and figuratively, that was coming from this situation. And while I'm proud to say I won an award for some of that work, I'm also very aware, and I want to say that many of the things that you will hear in today's webinar are things that I did not do. This is kind of like a medley of Larry's mistakes. And I hope that I can share some things with you that, heaven forbid, you end up in this type of situation yourself. You'll have some idea of some of the best practices that would help you as you're helping the people that you serve, as you're helping your staff, keep it together to a point where you can still get the work done and be effective. So I just wanted to kind of vent a little bit because those kind of experiences, and I know I'm not the only person in this on this webinar that's gone through that, but those are the kind of things that happen to you. It's a transformative moment. I will never be the same coming from that particular situation. Uncertainty is the world we live in now. And I think a really important saying about uncertainty is the only certain thing is that there is more uncertainty than we know what to do with. That's what we can say. And what you're feeling now and what your staff is feeling now, some of those incredible layers of pressure that people are disrupting their sleep, making relationships strained, making people not parent as well as they would like. All those kinds of things that are going on are coming from the layers of uncertainty that are creeping into our beings and into our life. Let me tell you about some of these layers of uncertainty, and different ones of you are experiencing them to different degrees, but just so we can kind of encapsulate this and put it to rest and move on to some other things in the webinar. I don't think personally that we're done with the stress and the trauma of COVID. I think COVID, I don't know about where you are, but where I'm at, there are still cases of COVID. People are still dying from COVID. It has not gone off the face of the earth by any means. And now there's other things that come into that space of diseases and problems and issues related to that that also make us flash back on what our experience was like during COVID. So there's also the impact of natural disasters. Our, our poor friends and colleagues and relatives and loved ones that are going through these horrific floods and hurricanes now that seem to be more and more in the news every day, that affects you even if you're not directly impacted by it, because it makes you relive certain types of trauma that came out of other experience where you may have been closer to the actual source of the trauma. There's the insecurity in the labor market. Job search is now going to record lengths, and it's not only going to record lengths, but it's going to record lengths with people who thought that they were more insulated from a long job search by the virtue of the skills they had, the degrees they had, the work experience they had. Now we see that those things are not keeping people protected from the stress of the long job search by any stretch of the imagination. They are right in the throes of that. And one of the things I want to suggest that you take back to your staff is that you have a conversation with people when they first come into your program and ask them how long they think their job search is going to be. And then have a conversation and acknowledge that no one can predict with any exact science how long your job search will be. The reality is that for most people, they are not predicting anything close to the ballpark of how long job search really is. And one of the first discussions needs to be around what are your expectations? What are you prepared for? And what does this mean for you and your family? There is all the uncertainty caused by the political landscape. I would never have thought in my life that I would be through a government shutdown of this length. And many of you, like I have at different times in my life, live paycheck to paycheck. And what was the impact of that type of uncertainty on you? It makes us worry about becoming homeless. And that can come both from us not having the money to live, not having places to go, as well as the overall rise in homelessness that we're seeing in our communities. So this is the landscape that leads me to want to do this webinar for you. And I don't mean to bum you out and take you down completely at the beginning of today's webinar, but you wouldn't be here in the webinar with me if you weren't seriously troubled by what's going on. This is not the webinar where you put on a smiley face and pretend that everything's fine. So I just wanted to put that out there as kind of framing the landscape for you. If we can go to the next slide, what this webinar is about, let me share with you a few things that I intend on covering in the course of today's webinar. We'll explore ideas and strategies designed to help people in management and workforce development programs become more effective in their roles as leaders in times of high stress and uncertainty in the workforce development field. So that will be a very significant part of today's webinar. We'll learn how to develop what I call a sense of collective responsibility that will help us and our staff cope with this uncertainty. You're probably not going to beat the uncertainty, but the better you become at coping with the uncertainty, the better off everyone will be. We'll look at the common reactions people have to uncertainty. And people react very differently to uncertainty, both based on who that person is, the role of uncertainty in their life and their history, and the type of uncertainty they're dealing with, and the support systems that they bring to that uncertainty situation that are going to help them get through it. And then we'll review the skills required to be an outstanding leader in times of uncertainty. And I just want to say that, as Kim mentioned, if you have any questions for me at any point during the webinar, please put those in the chat function. Towards the end of the webinar, Kim will read some of those questions to me, and I'll see if I can give you any helpful information based on the kind of questions you're asking me. And so let's go to the next slide and look at how do we put the issue of managing in uncertain times in perspective so we can proactively learn to manage more effectively in this environment. So putting it into perspective. So as someone in management, you have some unique responsibilities that your staff does not share. Probably in most of your organizations, you are responsible for making those decisions that are at the leadership level of your organization. That would be hiring, that would be implementing the strategic plan. There may be dialogue around those things, but ultimately, a lot of the responsibility falls on your plate. Well, that is part of the job. And when you got into management, you accepted that as part of the reason for taking that job, as the challenge that that gives you and as the space it gives you to figure out how to help people and help your organization. But it does not serve you well in a situation like this, in times of extreme and severe uncertainty. That kind of taking it yourself will not serve you. And it was one of the mistakes I made, was that I did not bring my staff on board to work on these issues early enough in the process. It was kind of, Larry can fix this and I'll take care of this. I've been a manager before. I can, figure out how to steer this ship. Can't do it. That's what makes these times unique, is their degree of uncertainty that these times are putting in our lap. They're very different than the average times you deal with in your job, where that here and there there's a blip of some kind of question and something you can't figure out. This is, I don't know what to do time. And the sooner you get to admitting that, the better off you are. So in this scenario, the thing that will help your organization be a better and healthier place and a more resilient place to work is when you start to think in we terms and not just in I terms. This is a we situation. So, excuse me, my asthma's bothering me a little bit, so I'm going to be doing that from time to time. You want to work with your staff to develop a sense of collective responsibility about finding strategies to combat the impact of uncertainty on your staff and the people you serve. So you're going to want to think of this as a we time, and how do I do this appropriately without my staff feeling like I'm dumping on them and I'm abdicating the responsibility that is part of my job. So I'm going to make some suggestions about how you position yourself and the work to be able to manage in this way from a position of collective responsibility. So let me give you some ideas about how to do that as we start on the next slide. So one thing you can do is you can actually explain to your staff what it is you're doing and saying, I understand that I have leadership responsibilities as we go through all of this, but I want to get your help and your input and your support and see this as a team effort and not just as something I'm doing by myself. Because if it's something I'm doing by myself, it probably will not be the best thing for you, because this is overwhelming. And it's really important, and hear me say this a couple times today, that you acknowledge that you're overwhelmed, because that allows your staff to acknowledge that. And if you just say, well, it's a little bit different, but mostly it's the same, that's your denial talking, and that's not going to help your staff or you very much in this situation. So one way to start developing and implementing that sense of collective responsibility is to announce that you're going to hold an all-staff meeting. And at the all-staff meeting, there's going to be two things that are going to happen. One is that people are going to vent and share some of the frustration that they're feeling and what this tsunami of uncertainty makes them feel like. They're also going to share ideas about how they are coping and dealing with the impact of the uncertainty. You may decide, and this depends on the nature of your staff, what people have gone through. I know there's people in this webinar because I've seen some of the names on the addresses. I know there's people that are coming from situations where they've already been through a fire or a flood, or they're in the process of going through that. And those kind of situations, you'll handle this differently than people who are not entrenched in the middle of something like that. You may want to have a facilitator with a mental health background involved in facilitating this conversation. It's important to have that kind of support for you, because we don't want this thing to spiral down into a downward drain of depression and negativity. That won't help anyone. We want it to be balanced between, this is really hard stuff and we're all going through it, and we're going to try and figure out the best way to handle it for everybody concerned. And as people are talking, you want to encourage them to make two lists. One list is a list of 3 things that show the impact of uncertainty in their work. So what is something that is happening because of the uncertainty that you're thinking about? Well, I'm fortunate. I have a very good marriage. I don't know how my wife puts up with me, but I have a very good marriage. And we've been married for 51 years. But when that earthquake happened, I have to tell you that I lost my temper with her more times than I'd like to admit. And she lost her temper with me, but mine was even worse because she wasn't in a job that was directly affected by that degree of uncertainty. So, how is it affecting you? So, some of you who have kids, especially teenagers, know that you're probably not as being as patient and as thoughtful and as focused as you'd like to be at this time with your kids. And again, this is important because it gives your staff room to realize what we're trying to do when we do this is, to some degree, we're trying to normalize what is happening and let people know it's not just happening to you, it's also happening to other people. The other list is a list of 3 things they're doing either in their work or outside of their work to help change and manage the uncertainty. So 3 things that are examples of the way the uncertainty is become a dominant force in their life. 3 things they're doing that show how they're managing it or coping with the uncertainty. So it's important that you emphasize the twofold focus of this exercise. One is to identify and name the things that the uncertainty is doing to you. 2 is to identify and name the things that you are doing to help you cope with the uncertainty. You know, one thing that my wife and I started doing, and we love TV watching. We watch probably more TV than we should, but we love TV watching. But we decided we were going to have some days where we were not going to watch or read or listen to any news about the earthquake, unless it directly affected us or somebody that was one of our loved ones. We were going to shut it out of our house. And one of the things I would suggest to you that may be helpful to you is have a politics-free day. Meaning, don't go to YouTube, to social media, get off, don't look over the person's shoulder when you're on the bus who's reading the newspaper, and don't let politics creep into your life. And this is a nonpartisan comment, but I think politics with this degree of uncertainty in the political sphere is a big part of the problem. So it's important that you emphasize that the focus of the exercise is twofold. Talk about how the uncertainty is eating away at you, and talk about how you are navigating the uncertainty. You want people to vent their frustrations and provide ideas about what they are doing to cope with the uncertainty so they can still be effective in their jobs. Be careful, as I mentioned before, be careful not to let the conversation become a downward spiral that focuses only on what is wrong with things. Don't let that happen. Facilitating this conversation is a balancing act between acknowledging the stress and focusing on what people can do to cope with it. Now, to further get across this idea of developing a sense of collective responsibility, I'd like you to go to the next slide, please. So I would encourage you to role model, which is one of the responsibilities of leadership, to role model the conversation by talking about the impact and the uncertainty on you and what you are doing to manage it in both your work life and your personal life. It will be helpful Believe me, I had people come up to me and talk to me about this. Some people came up to me and said, after these kind of meetings and conversations, and we had a whole series of them, was, it was so helpful. I always think of so and so, somebody that can manage anything. And they ended up saying some things and getting very close to crying in the course of the conversation. I can't tell you how helpful it was. And I'm going to go up to them and thank them for sharing some of that pain and some of that coping. Now, there's a danger when you do this, and that danger is you do not want to get in a position where you're saying we're all in the same boat. And the reason you don't want to say we are all in the same boat is it can feel, if you do that, that you're discounting the uneven impact uncertainty will have on people's lives. It's not a one size fits all experience. So you have people in your organization with histories of varying types and varying degrees of uncertainty. Some people are multiple trauma survivors. Some people have faced a lot of discrimination. Some people have faced oppression, and there's other forces that will cause responses in each individual that are different and unique for that particular person. After people make those lists, have some facilitated small group conversations to exchange experiences and ideas. You want to make this a collective. Remember, collective responsibility is what we're talking about here. And you want to work to structure this in any way that works with the culture of your organization, the structure of your organization, the traditions of your organization, and respect the differences in reactions and have people have those small group conversations and come to a different place if they can about this kind of situation. Encourage people to try coming up with new coping strategies they may learn from other people that they may not have tried, even if they think that these other coping strategies will not work, because you don't know till you actually try them whether one of those strategies would actually work for an individual or not. And part of the reason I talk about don't say we're all in the same boat kind of thing is because of the different reactions people have to uncertainty. And I want to give you an example of what I mean by that. So there are common reactions, and then there's ways that individuals show or demonstrate those particular reactions. So if we can go to the next slide, please, I want to talk about common reactions people have to uncertainty. So not everyone is going to experience all these reactions. And some other reactions may surface over time. Sometimes this is like like a sleeping dragon kind of thing, where you don't think it's bothering you and then it bothers you. So I remember people were having nightmares. I didn't have nightmares. I was really surprised because I have had nightmares in my life. I didn't have nightmares. And then about 3 months after the earthquake happened, I had the worst nightmare of my life. That's what I mean about things may surface over time. So how people experience uncertainty is influenced by their life experience, the number and strength of their support systems, and their history of dealing with uncertainty and many other factors. So here is an example of some of the reactions that people have to uncertainty. Denial is almost a universal reaction. When the brain is overwhelmed and it cannot possibly take in what is happening, it starts to develop an alternative reality. Any of you who are severe trauma survivors, and I'm a severe trauma survivor myself, you know that one of your early reactions to that was, this can't be happening. When I saw the freeway starting to shake and move, and I saw the cracks developing, my first thought was, this is a bad dream. I must have dozed off while I was driving, or I must still be sleeping. This can't be happening. And so this is refusing to acknowledge the change and its impact. This is maintaining a false sense of optimism. I would encourage you to look at the people in your program who are saying, this doesn't really bother me that much. I'm doing fine. And not to play therapist and say, well, I don't think you're really doing fine. Tell me what's going on. But also to say, well, I'm really glad for you. And if there's any point in time where that changes for you, I hope you'll take part in some of these other activities that we're doing. It doesn't sound like, from what you're saying, that you need them right now, because that can be a very legitimate reaction to the uncertainty of the situation. The opposite of denial is panic. And in the panic situation, there's intense anxiety and fear about the future, possibly making knee-jerk decisions. This is the time when people are under this kind of pressure cooker of uncertainty. You want to be careful how much career planning you do. They don't know who they are. They're disoriented. And career planning is fundamentally based on knowledge of self, who I am, what I want, what I like, what I don't like. And you want to be careful that you don't hold people to that kind of rigid career planning. It would be better to do career planning that had multiple possible pathways. And as people work through and things evolve, they could make decisions kind of further down the line. Anger, feeling frustrated and resentful toward the source of the uncertainty. I was so mad at that earthquake, especially when I got back to the office and I saw how many of my staff did not have a place to stay that night. How many of the job seekers we had lost a job, a home, lost loved ones in some cases. That's really big stuff. So it's very easy for anger to be very prominent in that situation. Bargaining. Bargaining is mentally negotiating ways to minimize the negative impact of the uncertainty. So bargaining is, if I do this, it'll make me think this way, it'll change this. How do you negotiate your mental state of being? Grief is that deep sadness and sense of loss. There were some things I lost in that earthquake. We couldn't go back in our house. It was condemned. Couldn't go back in our house. And there were things I lost, and there were things my kids had made, presents from my mother, all kinds of stuff. The grief is huge. And then coming around the curve on this, you get to acceptance. And acceptance is gradually coming to terms with the change and with the need to adapt. And then there's problem solving. And problem solving is actively finding constructive ways to navigate the new reality. I'm still problem solving my way through some of the things that happened in the course of that earthquake. Now, the other side of what we're talking about in terms of managing the uncertainty can happen by increasing the positive energy in your organization. And if we can go to the slide with that in the heading, I believe it's number 7, I'll give you some examples of what you can do to increase the positive energy in your organization. So your organization is like a teeter-totter. It's a balance of energy. And what happens in these uncertain times is that the negative energy starts to climb and the positive energy starts to decline. The negative energy starts to increase and the positive energy starts to decline. Positive energy starts to drain out of your organization. And one way to respond to that is to make a conscious effort to increase the positive energy in your organization. Let me give you some examples of how to do that. We started doing a thing that we called compliment a coworker. And compliment a coworker was a new kind of tradition in our organization where people very consciously thought about giving a coworker that had gone the extra mile, that had done something beyond the call, that had been helpful in ways that we didn't anticipate, that we would compliment them. And sometimes it was complimenting them in a staff meeting. Sometimes it was complimenting them where nobody was around, but you knew that that person was getting complimented. Another approach to complimenting a coworker is to put a space on a wall where you can put compliments for people, little post-its and compliments. Now, there's always a negative possibility with any of these strategies. So some people might feel bad. I didn't get a compliment. I didn't think so-and-so got a compliment, but that's petty stuff. When you're in the middle of this kind of situation we're talking about, people will be hungry for compliments. That's the nature of the negative drain. It increases the hunger for compliments. Second thing you can do to increase positive energy is to have celebrations when you exceed goals in your organization. You know, too often when we make a benchmark, recruit a certain number of people, get a certain number of people employed, put a certain number of on-the-job training contracts through our system. Those kind of things very often don't get the kind of notice that they really should. And I would suggest to you with exceeding goals celebrations that you make a big deal when you hit a collective goal, when you hit those things that are not easy to achieve, but you hit them and you're proud of them. Have some collective pride in that group effort. I'm going to share with you a couple other things about increasing positive energy in your organization. If we go to the next slide. Some people are going to be dealing with things that are the cause of the uncertainty plus. So people will have recently had somebody die in their family. There will be a divorce that happens in the family. Somebody will get a very serious illness in their family or in their immediate family. If people disclose that they are dealing with multiple situations like that, besides the general uncertainty that everyone is under, there should be special efforts made by you and by their coworkers to be supportive, be helpful. Those call on you to go beyond the average and think of some new way to particularly support that person because they're dealing with two things or maybe more that you're not dealing with. Another way to put more positive energy into your organization is to suggest some group activities or a series of activities that will generate positive energy. So a time for group exercise. We're all going to walk around the block 2 times at 1 o'clock right after lunch. Let's go do it. And that will, because of what it does to the body chemistry, to exercise, and the collective spirit that you experience, that will increase positive energy. A wonderful thing to do, not the easiest thing to do, but a wonderful thing to do is to look for ways to put humor into the organization. So have a talent show, make it crazy, make it off the wall, make it something that makes people smile. One of my staff came up with the idea, let's impersonate Larry. So one day we had an impersonate Larry contest, and people dressed like what I dress like. They acted like what I act like, and everybody laughed about it, including me. So you could have a costume show, any way to put humor. Humor is a fantastic antidote to the negative energy drain that can happen in these situations. So increasing positive energy is one of the antidotes to the stress of uncertainty. It should be a management goal to make that happen. So I started putting up cartoons all over the office, funny cartoons. And people, you would see people in small clusters laughing about these cartoons if one happened to appeal to them in a particular way. We're going to take a pause now because we're going to go into a breakout room. We'll be in the breakout room for about 8 minutes or so. You'll be with a small group of people. And what I'd like to ask you to do is I'd like you to introduce yourself, your name, job title, organization. Please, no long speeches about who you serve or the services you provide. We just won't have time for that. But name, job title, and organization. And then what do you think is the best thing you do as a leader in your organization to help people navigate times of uncertainty? What's the best thing you've come up with? You'll see my name is in one of the breakout rooms, but I won't be participating. This is time for you folks to talk. And then we'll reconvene and continue with the webinar. So, Kim, can you work your magic and put folks into the breakout room?
I can. So everybody should have been assigned a breakout room. So you can just click join and we will see you back here in about 8 minutes. All
Uh,
right.
uh,
Welcome back, everybody. I think
the,
we have everybody back.
we're getting an echo. Oh no, I guess it's gone. I hope you got some helpful ideas in the course of the breakout room. Let's go to the next slide now. If we can go to the next slide. So this is really important work in this space of uncertainty, and that is communication. And I want to give you, this is my bias kind of, and some things that I learned from not necessarily following best practices that I would follow now. One is to provide regularly scheduled updates. So the people know that I'm just picking out of the hat here. The people know that on Tuesday at 1 o'clock there will be a 15-minute update. Have to remember that in times of uncertainty, information is safety. When people are feeling like their need for information is being fed, they will feel more safe. Now, you need to acknowledge how the update make people feel. You may say something you think will calm everybody down, and it has the exact opposite effect. So let me give you an example. If a manager said, I know we were hoping to have a definitive answer about the funding by now, and I'm very sorry I don't have that information yet. It didn't come from the central office. I hope to get it by next Tuesday. Thanks for your understanding and your great work with our job seekers. It's clear to me how hard you are working, even while you are dealing with so much stress. I want you to know I appreciate it. Now, this would be much better than we don't have any news about the funding. We don't have any news about the funding is going to increase anxiety. Explaining what you can explain, even if that is to say, I don't know, will generate more of a feeling of safety from people, which is what they crave in times of uncertainty. Use different channels of communication. So don't always make it that 15-minute meeting. Also distribute information through emails, texts, put up notices, talk with people in small groups, use anonymous employee surveys, use technology in any way that you can. You want to make your agency kind of like the communication central and make sure that the communication is what you can do. Don't overpromise anything. All promises are up for grabs in this kind of environment. Now, it's difficult to do this because it requires you taking time to put into communications where typically you just give people a message and that should be enough. So let me give you some ideas about what will help build the communication in a way that will help people be part of managing the uncertainty. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Slide number 10. So here's a few things that I would suggest. Try and find a growth mindset and bring in an element of hope even when times are uncertain. But don't downplay the real difficult emotions people are struggling with at this time. Think about messaging. People are going to hang on every word you say. So as you craft the message, see if you can incorporate both hope and the reality that people are facing at the same time. This is very difficult. I had somebody on my staff who was a professional writer, had been an author, had authored several books, and I had them critique some of my email messages that were going to go out and some of the things I was going to hand out before I sent them out. And it was fantastic to get the professional kind of a wordsmith perspective on this from somebody who crafts language for a living was really, really very, very helpful to do. I'm not saying you all have that resource available to you, but if you have somebody who's a particularly good writer and can deliver messages like this and integrate both hope and reality, I would ask them to help with this. Keep reminding people of the mission and the value of the work. Keep reminding them of the mission and the value of the work. I like to begin staff meetings with a success story. Can somebody tell us a success story about somebody who was very difficult to serve, somebody who had lots of issues, somebody who was right on the verge of becoming homeless, somebody who had attempted suicide and was now getting mental health treatment? Manage meaning, MEANING, not just tasks. So don't just talk about what people need to do. Talk about its impact, how deep it goes. It always frustrates me. The funding sources count how many people we place, how long they hold their jobs, what skills they acquired, what certificates they acquired, all that stuff. That's important stuff, right? Here's what I see. I see that our work saves lives. I see that our work strengthens communities. I see that our work keeps families together. I see that our work starts to breed possibility when we're surrounded by despair and people are feeling like there is no way to get better. I think the ultimate impact of our work is that we take and work with people who are generally thinking, my life is as good as it's going to get. This is it, this is what it's going to be. And we prove them wrong. We improve the quality of their life. And of course, we don't do it alone. It's a partnership between us and the people that we're serving and the resources that we have and our coworkers and our partners. But that's what we do. That's what we do. So don't be afraid to get nostalgic or hokey. Talk about, most of you have been in this work for a little longer than many of the staff you're supervising. Talk about the early impact that you saw on different people in the work. And talk about how it changed you. Dislocated workers, we had lots of people that came very close to committing suicide. It was a daily occurrence that somebody would tell you how they were thinking about committing suicide. If you've never worked with a lot of dislocated workers, you may not understand the difference in helping people who are climbing up the quote unquote success ladder versus working with people who are coming down that success ladder. Very difficult and draining, and a feeding ground for secondary trauma to work with people who are coming down that success ladder. So keep people focused on the mission, the values, the successes, the times when we turned things around that didn't look like they could be turned around. And this communication, remember, communication is safety. People will feel a visceral sense of relief when you've communicated with them, even if you don't have a lot to say. Just feeling that you care and that concern is a really important part of what you bring to your role as you rebuild the fabric of your organization. Make sure that when you schedule meetings and attempt to meet with people on a regular basis, make sure that you talk to people even though you don't have a lot to say. Talk about the mission. Talk about the successes. Talk about why you come to work every day. Talk about how this work has had an impact on not only you, but your own family. And be careful if you have to cancel a meeting with staff people or with your leadership team. People will take that very personally. Oh, well, we're not important. That's why they did. No, no. Explain the reason why you had to cancel that meeting and explain when it will be rescheduled. Don't leave a huge communication gap there with just a meeting canceled and nothing further coming out of that. What do you do when you don't know much? Well, let's look at the next slide and talk about that. You share what you know and don't know, and you're very clear about the difference. So there's three kinds of information you'll be giving people. One is, this is what I know. And as far as I've been told, this is what I know. The second kind of information is, I don't know, but I hope to find it out by such and such a date. So it's a little less secure. I don't know it, but I hope to find out by such and such a date. And then the third thing, the thing that people don't want to hear is, I don't know, and I'm not sure when I'll find out. But you have to say that sometimes. I can't tell you how many times I said those things when I was managing that program. There was so much at stake for the people that we serve, for my staff. The things got processed at such a high level during the course of that work. Encourage two-way communication, meaning that you want to make sure that they can ask you things. One of the things that I did that ended up being very popular was I had a question box. Well, notice it wasn't a question and answer box. It was just a question box. Leave any question in that box. I'll put up a written answer to that question within 2 working days. That box was always full. There were things that people felt too uptight to ask openly. Sometimes there were things about criticisms of me and ways that I acted or some mistake that I made that they felt uncomfortable saying to me directly or even privately, that they wanted a response to. Do some anonymous surveys of staff's feeling. Take the temperature. Take the temperature. So you are feeling kind of what they're feeling. Now, I want to pass on a little bit of a very important message that I don't think I was that effective in following myself. And that's on this next slide, which is, don't forget that taking care of your team starts with taking care of yourself. My wife always had to remind me and say, you're driving yourself to burnout. That's not going to help anybody. Not going to help me, not going to help the kids, not going to help the unemployed people, not going to help your staff. You have to take care of yourself. And some of you are going to find this hard to do because you have over-dedication syndrome. You're too dedicated. And too dedicated means that you sacrifice so much of yourself that you lose sight of the boundary of when you're giving away parts of yourself that you can't recover or that you can't manage yourself. So here's some things that I discovered and I continue to discover that kind of help me with that situation and help me with that problem. Set your working hours and keep them. Very difficult to do. Very difficult to do. Whenever possible, do not work outside of normal working hours. Never email your team outside of their scheduled work hours, unless there's an emergency. If you have a home workspace, try and keep that as separate as possible from the rest of your household. Meaning every piece of paper that's work related stays in the workspace. It does not leak out of that room and end up on the kitchen table or the dining room table. It doesn't go there. It's got a space, and you make sure that it stays in that space. Every workday, schedule some me time. It could be as short as 10 minutes twice a day, but this is time where you just chill out. You don't look at any emails. You don't read any information. You don't have pen in hand figuring out the next thing you're going to do. You stop. I had to get lessons from somebody who meditates to be able to do this more effectively, but I'm so glad that I did. It was so helpful. Me time is breathing time. Your heartbeat will come down. Your breath will get restored to where it should be. Your pulse will come down. And if you have it scheduled, so 2 to 2:10 today is me time. And your staff knows that sometimes you need time for yourself, which is a very good lesson, so that they will take time for themselves. You know, the staff members you have that work past burnout, not good. Everybody suffers. So schedule some me time and make sure that you take it. Let's look at the next slide. Let me give you a couple other things related to taking care of yourself. Look for and learn from mentors. Who is the most chill person on your staff? They don't have to be another manager, but you know that person, you know, the hurricane and tornadoes are all in the news now. Who's the person that's the eye of the tornado? When chaos is reigning all around you, and it's very difficult to figure out which way is up and how to get a breath and what to do and how to make this all work. Who's the person who does not lose their center? You need to have a conversation with that person about how they do that. What things do they do that helps them stay centered? And what is it that you could be doing that would let you learn how to do that better? So look for mentors. I'm so glad to see that NAUTIP is starting a mentoring program. That's one of its new services. I just signed up to volunteer for that. I don't know if I have anything to offer, but if people want to hear me jabber, they can hear me jabber. But thanks, you can pass that on to folks. That was a brilliant, brilliant idea. Develop an end of the day stress reduction ritual. So this is before you go home. What do you do? And is there a way to put something in those moments of when you're at the end of the working day that will help you transition in a healthier way to your non-working life? So I love music. And if I'm traveling somewhere and I rent a car, I want a loud stereo. I want something that I can really blast out some of that tunes to. And then I pull up alongside a car and there's people half my age in that car. And they're like looking, I heard one guy say, "Look at Grandpa, he's rocking it." And I just got this huge smile on my face. And as they were saying that, I was feeling tremendous release. Like this is really working. So we need to have an end of the day stress reduction ritual. Just going to say a couple of other things here, and then we'll get into some questions. If you can turn to go to the next slide, let me say a couple other things here. Keep a success journal. A success journal is like a diary, and it can be helpful if it's not on your computer, but it's actually a little diary that you write in it the things in the day that you take pride in, that you did, that you accomplished, that you succeeded in, where you grew in a certain way that you didn't expect, where you implemented some of these things that made sense to you. But keep a success journal. We tend to lose sight of the successes in our work. Things are flying by us at the speed of light, and then we forget, oh, that one staff person who came to me a week ago and said that they've been thinking about quitting just came to me and told me that they changed their mind, and it's somebody I really like, and this is why they changed their mind, and it was something I did and I didn't even realize it. You need to celebrate your own successes. And there's nothing wrong with taking a few minutes to write in a success journal. Organize a manager support group. You need help. You need other people facing this dilemma. They don't have to be in workforce development. As a matter of fact, it's better if they're not in workforce development. But I can tell you, this degree of uncertainty is being felt not only in public agencies, but also in nonprofits and in for-profit businesses. I've been consulting in the private sector for over 40 years. I have never seen so much chaos and so much uncertainty and so much inability to plan as I am seeing right now. And for you to get together with some of those other managers and to do the build the collective identity kind of exercise we did, talk about how this is impacting your work, talk about what you're going to do to keep it from destroying the good work that you do. You need a support group. Your staff are more likely to have a support group than you are. First of all, there's more of them. They're connected by doing the work every day very closely. But you need your own manager's support group. Maybe people just meet for lunch at the last Friday of the month and share ideas about how are you doing it. And it's better, like I said, if it's not workforce development. Otherwise, you'll tend to be talking about the same things. You want to be talking about some different things. And I'm not saying you need to do this, but I am saying, and it was very helpful to me, which is consider talking with a therapist or a coach. Now, one thing I want to address kind of in closing here, my part is, this is on slide number 15. There are people in every organization that thrive out of making it an erotic workplace. They're the chronic complainers. They can always find a reason that something's not right. They rarely take responsibility for that, but they're people who are disruptive in maybe not very overt ways, but they're disruptive to the unity that you need and to the sense of shared collective responsibility you need to cope in uncertain times. They love uncertain times. You need to take them on. You need to talk to them and say, I heard from a number of people that you said this about this. That's not accurate. And I wish you would come to me first to clear it up so that you had it right. And we can't let you keep doing this. It's interesting in surveys that I and a number of other people have done about why people quit organizations. One of the reasons people quit organizations is that management enables the dysfunctional employee and is too hesitant to deal with the dysfunctional employee. And people get tired of that. They get tired of working near that. They get tired of having it dumped on them. It's burnout city. So make sure that the people that thrive in that uncertainty and seem to stoke the fire of uncertainty make sure that they don't run the roost. Play hierarchy here. Clean house. I'm not saying you fire them. I don't know what the rules are. I don't know what the traditions are. I don't know what the culture is. But as a manager, I've hired to manage over 500 people in my career. That's the worst part of my job is having to deal with one of these people who just does not get it. And who, in fact, if I hired them, I made the mistake. And I always try and review hiring. If I'm complaining about an employee, what did I do wrong? Not what's the employee doing, but what did I do wrong? That this got through the hiring process. I just want to end with a few things and then we'll get to a couple of questions. On slide number 17, there's a couple of quotes about leadership and uncertainty that I want to share with you. My enemy is not the uncertainty. It is not even my responsibility to remove the uncertainty. That may be beyond what I can do. It is my responsibility as a leader to bring as much clarity as possible into the midst of the uncertainty. I think of my new job title as executive director in charge of making clarity out of uncertainty. The most successful people in organizations know how to adapt and not panic in response to uncertainty. Darwin said the thing that could determine the difference between species that would survive and not survive was their ability to adapt. And I love this last one. I like to think of myself as a ship's anchor in the middle of a rough storm. I may get pushed around, but with the help of my team, I do what I can to help hold the ship in place. You're the anchor. Not easy, but so important. And it can change the lives and the way that people feel and what they take home or what they don't take home with them. You can do that. If you start by following some of the things that I've shared with you and you learn from better practices from other people, you will be able to do that. I just want to show you the last slide on slide number 18. There's some helpful links there for you to check out. I'm going to be sending out a follow-up email with some other information in as well, and I know Kim is going to be sending out one. Kim, do we have any questions in the chat that you want asked? I can't promise answers, but what do you think?
Okay. Yeah, so I'll just read a couple of comments and then I saw one question, and then if other people want to put questions in, feel free to do so. So Kyle said at the beginning of the webinar, he said, I've seen that it really helps some of our team is to actively to have something to help with instead of having answers. For example, getting involved with food drives or helping participants build a list of food resources that they can pull from. And I think you kind of touched on that, Larry, in your presentation, but he was just really talking about how it's important to get involved in other aspects of the organization.
I think
Dana's,
let me just say, I think that collective volunteering is a great way to build collective positive energy. And it may not be ongoing volunteering. It may be something you do as a group for 3 hours on a Saturday. People put a list of where they think they'd like to spend their time. Everybody votes on it. And then whatever gets the most votes is how you spend that time. Nothing beats helping other people with their challenges while you're challenged at the same time. I do a lot of volunteer work, and it's not because I'm such a great guy, but it really helps me stay centered.
you are a great guy, Larry.
Thank you.
Okay, and let me say, Dana had a really good comment as well. Dana said our fiscal manager employer has contracted with a mental health counseling company, and they provide the employees with sessions as needed up to a certain amount, and it's paid for by the employer, and that's a part of the benefits package. So I
Sure.
even remember at my previous job, and maybe in my current, I know at my previous job we had access to therapy sessions. And we had access to that, but not necessarily, people didn't take advantage of it. So thank you for pointing that out, Dana, just as a reminder that it may be a part of your benefits package.
The helpers need
Um,
to get help.
And then Tiffany says she loved the suggestion of increasing positive energy in an organization. And she made reference to a book that they're reading in her workplace. And let's see, the name of the book is The Five Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace, Empowering Organizations by Encouraging People by Gary Chapman. So thank you for sharing that, Tiffany.
Yes, thank
A
you.
question that Diana had was not everyone is good with group activities. For whatever reason, they don't feel comfortable. What do you suggest in that case if they're not comfortable with group activity?
Well, I think you want to be careful how you pose the group activity. You don't want to make it sound like it's mandatory. You want to make it sound like it's optional. And you don't want to start probing why people don't want to do it because that's their prerogative to decide not to do it. If people are staying outside of group activities on a consistent basis and you feel comfortable doing this, depending on your relationship with the individual, I don't see anything wrong with having a conversation with them about saying, is there something about this activity that makes it difficult for you to want to participate? If you feel like telling me about that, maybe there's a way we can, in disability type terms, figure out a reasonable accommodation for you that will make it more possible for you to do. So anytime you have a collective activity, people will say, well, let's have a Christmas party. Everybody celebrates Christmas. No, they don't. Let's do this. Everybody, no, they
Mhm.
don't. So you need to make it safe for people. And always, as you're announcing these things, saying, a lot of people want to do this, but by no means by saying that everyone should be doing this. We won't treat you differently if you say that you don't want to do this. That is just up to you.
Great. Thank you, Larry. Julie asked the question. Julie works at the Department of Labor and oversees a variety of programs. Unfortunately, the current executive director has created a toxic work environment, and the workplace atmosphere feels dark and uncertain. Despite these challenges, they have a dedicated and talented team that she wants to help to restore the positive culture they had under the previous director, but she feels limited in her ability to do so because of the current director. And basically, she was asking, what advice do you have for helping her team and her cope with this toxic leadership and rebuild a positive workplace atmosphere?
Well, I think first of all, you want to do your research and you really want to go on the internet and look at strategies for surviving the bad boss. Um, I think it's a mistake that we don't talk about that enough with our job seekers because it's one of the main reasons we have job retention problems. Not that we have employees all the time with problems, but we have employers, supervisors, managers that should not be in those positions. And they will create toxic work environments that can be particularly devastating to certain types of employees, depending on their background. I think they're doing a really good and smart thing by forming a subculture within the organization of people who want to be involved in things at that level and figure out the alternative. I will tell you, as soon as that other manager gets wind of anything happening like that, they're going to do everything they can to sabotage it. And generally, in my experience, what that leads to is more solidarity amongst the employees who have been, have to put up with this shift in culture. and they find better and more ways to cope and to respond to that. Don't underestimate, and this can set up, I know I'm saying something that can set off a lot of fireworks in the workplace, but don't underestimate if your organization has anything where whistleblowers can complain about toxic workplaces. And there's a way to do that without being, taken to task for it, if there's a safe way to do it. Also, there's strength in numbers, and sometimes this is something that people have to address collectively as opposed to individually. My daughter works for the federal government. Our daughter works for the federal government. She's going through this exact same thing right now. So my heart goes out to you. It's very hard to watch culture change, especially in times when there's all this other uncertainty swirling around you. Um, and Linda's way of coping about it is she's added about 3 new hobbies to her repertoire over the last 6 months. There are things, some things she does at work, some things she does on break, some things she does on her way to work. So she's created kind of an alternative way of being to be able to survive. And she's only got 4 months to retirement. So that's kind of, she keeps her eye on the prize, and that's what kind of keeps her going in that situation.
Okay, Larry, thank you for that. And there's one more question I wanted to get to because a couple of people commented on it. So we'll make this our last question. But any tips for dealing with team members who don't respect you as a manager because you're younger than they are?
Well, that's a form of age discrimination to be sure. And I think one of the issues here is, how do you take it up with your boss? In other words, this is an issue that can come up at any time. Somebody new gets transferred into the unit, and all of a sudden you've got somebody who's older than people, and people aren't respecting them. So I think you need to document it. You need to learn more about it. Go on the ARP website. There's a great deal of information about this on the ARP website. Google working across different generations and what that means. Sometimes it's something that you figure out how to navigate. It never gets great, but it can get better. So I think it's one of, the workplace is multi-generational now. And I think it's one of the things we have to kind of put in our toolbox as managers. I think there's a lot online around this issue that people should be able to access and put it to good use in their work. I think we're about ready to wrap up. Um, I just want to put in a quick plug. I do offer over 100 webinars. You'll see some links here to some of the places to get the webinars. I have a free newsletter that comes out. Your names will be put on the subscription list. You can unsubscribe at any time that you want. And there are all the back issues of the newsletter with over 500 articles from them that are on my website as well. So I hope you enjoyed the webinar, that you listened to the recording. Feel free to share the recording with any coworkers, managers, and if your organization's interested in talking to me about training for you, just have someone in management send me an email, and we'll see if the next time I'm training for you, I can be training for you and your partners and your coworkers. Another thanks to Kim Meadows for, once again, another great job of pulling off a very successful webinar. Thank you so much, Kim. And thanks to all of you. You do such important work. Don't forget the
Absolutely.
importance of the work. You take care.
Absolutely. Thank you to you all. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday, and we look forward to seeing you all real soon.